Good evening and welcome to the Black Hole. Today we are going to discuss the dynamics of Indian Muslims' experiences amidst the backdrop of rising Hindu nationalism. We are very grateful to and we are very honored to have Dr. Christophe Jaffrelot with us. He's the professor of Indian politics and sociology at the King's India Institute, London. Also, we are grateful to Dr. Pervez Hoodbhoy, who will moderate today's discussion. Before we start the session, it is requested that please you turn your cell phones to silent mode. Also, when you will like to say a few words when the Q&A session is opened, please raise your hand and talk only after having this microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr. Christophe Jaffrelot and Pervez Hoodbhoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Nair, for starting this off. I'm very happy to welcome all of you to the Black Hole. And I see that there are more people than there are seats. So this is an indication that Professor Christophe Jaffrelot is quite a celebrity here in Pakistan, even though his books seem not to be very widely available. Christophe spends part of his time in Paris, part in London. In Paris, he is a research fellow at what is called CERI. What does that stand for?
Center for International Research.
He's also president of the French Political Science Association. And I was wondering how to describe him. Should he be described as a historian of South Asia or as a political scientist? And he says he's more of a political scientist than a historian. So he spends his time in Paris, but he also spends his time in London at King's College. And he's all over the world. Right now he's here. Soon, I suppose you will be going to Lahore and possibly to India as well on this trip. We're very pleased to have him, and he's going to be speaking about the state of Muslims in India today. We know that's not very good. He's going to give a lot of quantitative evidence because he's a political scientist and he believes in numbers. But I'm going to leave that to the end, and Christophe, I want to understand a few things first, just to set the general context. We know that India has been moving away from inclusivism towards exclusivism. Now, this is done in a way that's very different from the other countries in South Asia. So, for example, Pakistan describes itself as an Islamic state. When somebody takes the oath for a government position, he has to swear on the Quran. The same thing is true for the Maldives and of Bangladesh. Those are Muslim states. But if you look at Nepal or Bhutan or Sri Lanka, those formally call themselves Hindu states. So, in a sense, they're also exclusivists. But what is the difference between the Indian form of exclusivism and the exclusivism that the others formally they are exclusive? What's the basic difference between that?
Well, the basic difference, of course, has to do with history, because India was created as a secular state, and the word secularism, was even written in the constitution after an amendment in the mid-1970s. So de jure, India is a secular country. De facto, it's not anymore as secular as it used to be. And that's the big difference. There is no change in the constitution, but there is some change in the practice of politics. And one good example of that, and I will show you some figures by the end, is that for the first time in 2014 and again in 2019, the party that won the elections, the BJP, the ruling party, had no Muslim among its members of parliament. And that is because it had also very few candidates coming from the Muslim minority. And de facto, you see a reduction of the presence of minorities on the public scene. De jure, there is this secular tradition that remains enshrined in the text of the Constitution. This is the difference. This difference, of course, is something we see also at the level of the government. We used to have minorities represented in the government, and this is hardly the case today. Now, this disconnect between the practice and the letter, if you want, is also somewhat reducing because there are some changes in the laws. There are some changes in the Constitution itself. In 2019, there was this Citizenship Amendment Act that revisited one of the key pillars of the Indian Constitution, citizenship. How do you become an Indian citizen? This amendment made it impossible for Muslim refugees from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh to become Indian. It's only the non-Muslim refugees from these three countries who can become Indian. For the first time, you saw religion becoming a criterion for access to citizenship in India. And there are other laws that you can mention at the state level, interesting laws, difficult to understand sometimes, very long and circumvented, but one makes inter-religious marriages very difficult. Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh. One makes conversion to another religion very difficult. And one, in Gujarat especially, makes it very difficult to sell your house to someone of a different religion. You need the permission of the district magistrate for doing that now. So, legal transformations are also making the Republic of India less inclusive. So it's more de facto than de jure, but also in the laws, also in the constitution, you see some changes gradually taking place at the local level, state level, but also national level.
I was looking at the BJP's manifesto just a little while ago, and it talks about the Pancha Nishthas, which means 5 major commitments. And they all seem rather innocuous. There's democracy, secularism, nationalism comes first, then democracy, secularism, I don't remember the rest, but 5 of them, and it doesn't seem to be about kicking out Muslims. And yet, de facto, that is what is happening, and that is what you will convince us of when you give your facts and figures. But on the face of it, this is very different from the way that we in Pakistan made ourselves exclusivists. And the fact is that, whatever you're going to show us, look, there are still a lot of Muslims living inside India. They're not leaving and they don't want to leave. Or maybe they don't have an option. But in Pakistan, most of our non-Muslims have been forced out of the country. This might change. I mean, Indian Muslims might want to leave. But so far, they seem to feel more secure than non-Muslims here in Pakistan.
Yes, it depends in which part of the country, because India is a huge country with many variations. There is hardly any problem in the south. And it's very interesting to see that all the southern states, all the peninsula, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, Telangana, Andhra, all these states are non-BJP now. There is not even one southern state of India ruled by the BJP. Karnataka was the last one, and Congress won the elections earlier this year. In this part of the country, you're a Dravidian first, you're a Tamil-speaking Muslim first. Well, you're a Tamil speaker first. that makes a big difference. You look at northern India and you see a different situation, except in parts like West Bengal, Orissa, where the situation is not so different as it was before. But interestingly, precisely, you see migrations of Muslims going in these states where they feel safer. They will not go easily elsewhere anyway. It's not so easy, except for the rich who can afford to go to Dubai or even to New Zealand when you have the means to pay for the visa or the permit. But you see some transformation within the borders of India itself, which is quite interesting, like a kind of inner partition.
Now, I want some clarification for my own self, and I'm sure others here will want that too. We've heard again and again that India wishes to become a Hindu Rashtra, a Hindu state. Now, we've heard of there being such a thing as an Islamic state. Now, whether that actually exists or not, but at least we can say something about it. An Islamic state would presumably be one where the law is based on the Sharia, or weakening that down, that no law can exist which is in conflict with the Quran or the Hadith. In terms of the Hindu Rashtra, what is it that would define its outlines? Would it be, let's say, conformity with the laws of Manusmriti? What is it that could make a Hindu state? After all, we did see Nepal being a Hindu state until I think 2008 when I decided not to be a Hindu state. But Bhutan is.
Yeah.
So what is a Hindu state? I don't really understand.
Well, to get this, and it's rather sophisticated indeed, you have to go back to the Charter of Hindutva that was written by Savarkar in 1923, exactly 100 years ago. And this is, by the way, a very important point to make. This is a 100 years old movement. Where do you find a movement that is 100 years old? RSS was created in 1925. They'll celebrate their 100th anniversary in 2 years. There are very few organizations in the world that have this kind of long-term perspective. That's a very important point to keep in mind. Now, what is there in Hindutva? Hindutva, who is Hindu, is the book that Savarkar wrote in 23, and where he is for the first time explaining what should be India, what should be this nation, what this nation should be. And here you see that he is reacting to Mahatma Gandhi's views. You know, Mahatma Gandhi has taken over power in Congress in 1920, incidentally in the Nagpur Congress. Nagpur being, of course, stronghold for RSS also. Mahatma Gandhi explains India is made of different communities on a par, equal to each other. You know, it's a collection of communities. Muslims, Hindus, Parsis, Christians, Sikhs people, horizontally organized. And India has to be multicultural. And for Mahatma Gandhi, it meant that he had to take the lead in the Khilafat movement. You know, he was the Khilafat movement leader at the same time. That's the Gandhian definition. And in reaction to this Gandhian definition, Savarkar explains that Hindus are the sons of the soil. They are the original inhabitants of this territory. And he says territory matters a lot because this is a sacred land. Punya Bhumi. Yeah? Matrubhumi is Punya Bhumi, equation. My motherland is a sacred land. Hindus are the sons of the soil. the original inhabitants of this territory that is sacred, that is theirs. And incidentally, the parallel with Zionism is very striking. Also because for Savarkar, Hindus are not made of believers of a religion. They are a people. And he says, in the vein of Hindus run the blood of Vedic fathers. And this is a very interesting word, blood, because he keeps saying that Hindus are a race. Not believers, but people sharing the same blood. So when you have this idea of an original people inhabiting a sacred land, what is the space you leave for the others? And this is the big question. Hindu Rashtra is primarily a Hindu nation that is not supposed to accommodate multiculturalism. The Muslims, the Christians, are invited by Savarkar to pay allegiance to Hindu symbols of identity. You may be a Muslim in the private sphere, you may be a Christian in the private sphere, but you have to pay allegiance in the public sphere to the majoritarian identity, that is the Hindu identity. This is the Hindu Rashtra.
And if I remember right, Savarkar admired Hitler for the final solution and suggested that maybe that's the best way to deal with the invaders being both Muslims and Christians. Now, the idea of Bharatvarsh, the idea that the name of India should be changed to Bharat or Bharatvarsh, I don't know which is the more suitable
Bharat
one.
is enough, yeah.
Okay. To what extent do you think this idea has caught on, and what are the implications for Muslims in India?
It's a very old idea, because these two visions of the nation, now the Gandhian nation, the Nehruvian nation, and the Hindu nationalist nation, are in competition for 100 years. So the first sentence of the Indian constitution says, India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. In the first sentence, you have both names already there. Because in the Constituent Assembly debates, you have had this tension, permanent tension, between those who wanted something more secular and those who wanted something more Hindu. The debate on the language. What language for India? In which language should we write the constitution itself? Constantly there was a tension. English, Hindi. And at the end, Hindi is the national language and English is the official language. So you can retain both of them. But just to say that this tension was old, and it was there already even before, when you had the first, I would say, pre-Savarkar Hindu nationalists like Tilak. Tilak was also asking for Bharat instead of India and so on. How far is this feasible today, to change the name of a country like that one? It is more, I think, for the electoral consumption, for the coming electoral campaign, than for actually a reform that would be very difficult. You know, you need at least two-thirds of parliament for making any constitutional reform. That's, by the way, also why it is de facto more than de jure, because in the Rajya Sabha, in the upper house, BJP is struggling. It can deal with some state parties and get some majority on some issues. That is a big issue. And to make this reform will be a big one.
So it's basically posturing, and you don't think that the name of India is going to change. I think you're probably right. But coming back to what Savarkar said, that the Hindus form a race. A race is defined by genes. You can look at the difference of the genes of an African with an Eskimo and say that this is that is that. People have actually taken genes from North India and other parts of India. They've sent them to the laboratory for testing, and asked, can you, on the basis of laboratory testing, tell the difference between a Hindu and a Muslim? And the answer is no. Because of conversions. What if today I convert to some other religion, my genes remain the same? So it is absurd to say that the Hindus form a race.
Yes.
Why don't the intelligent people in India, I'm sure they're very intelligent. I mean, after all, they've gone to the moon. What's the problem in recognizing the stupidity?
You know, this is exactly the problem we have with ideologues, not only in India, but all over the world. They believe in their own lies. And it's useful to propagate lies when you have an identity politics on your agenda. You mentioned the genes business. There is another very interesting one. Hindu ideologues do not believe in what we call Aryan invasions. You know, we all know that South Asia has been populated by people coming from outside. But when you claim that you are the sons of the soil, you can't recognize that there have been some inflow of people. So in the textbooks, and textbooks all over the world, in this country also, are very revealing of the official ideology you want to propagate. So in these textbooks now, you do not see any mention to Aryan invasions, for instance. Yeah, you invent a reality that has nothing to do with science.
So then, India and Pakistan are really moving closer together because they reject science by rejecting Darwinism. Now, Darwinism is being taken out of their textbooks, just like Darwinism is rejected here in Pakistan. Now, earlier this was not so in India. It has always been this way in Pakistan, more so after General Ziaul Haq than earlier. So the similarities are getting very, very close to each other.
Yeah, well, on the Indian side, it's a work in progress. I'm convinced that the point of no return has not been reached because it takes time. And I repeat, there are so many regional variations. You know, you will not see the same kind of dominant discourse in Chennai and in Lucknow or Agra. That's a very important point to make. There is a real diversity. And in many states, education being a state subject, you have different textbooks telling different stories. But yes, the trend is what you say. The trend is going in this direction. And in less than 10 years, we've seen already a significant transformation of the country. Yeah.
Good. So now I don't want to take time away from you from presenting your research, which will shed light on the state of Muslims
I hope so.
in India. You have been researching this issue for long in India, and of course your book, The Rise of Modi, is precisely, well, this is one of the things that goes into it.
Yes.
But just one last question.
Yeah.
I still don't understand what a constitution for a Hindu Rashtra is. And how is it different from the earlier secular India of Nehru?
One of the things I'm going to show you is that there is a certain continuity between the two, so far as Muslims are concerned. No. Muslims in India are more marginalized than before, but they were before already at the margin. So we are still facing this disconnect between what is there on the paper, what is supposed to be the country about, equality, no discrimination, and what we observe in practice. It is true for minorities, it is true for Dalits, and ex-untouchables. You have this constant disconnect between what is supposed to be implemented and what is effectively done. And that's the job of the social scientist, precisely, to explore this disconnect and to explain this disconnect. So the data I'm going to show are the first step in a work that remains to be done. How do we explain that? Attitudes, the way you discriminate without saying that you are discriminating. And why? What is at the back of the mind? So the resilience of prejudice, the resilience of hierarchies, the prejudice is so deeply rooted in so many ways. It goes in the same direction so far as gender is concerned. And I will not mention the gender issue there because it would take us too far. But we have only 6% of women as members of legislative assemblies in India. 6%. It's minuscule, a minuscule minority of women in the political scene, in spite of the equality that is supposed to prevail, again, and in spite of positive discrimination intentions or the idea that there should be a women quota. There is none for the moment. There may be one day. We'll see how it will work. But in a society like that one, by the way, if you do not have positive discrimination, if you do not have a quota, things are not moving very, very fast, really.
Okay, now I won't stop you. Once you show your data, then we can resume our discussion.
Try to be as
after which we'll open this up to the audience.
With pleasure. Shall we bring that down? Yeah. So what I'm going to present is, in fact, the result of a collective endeavor. We are working, and I think this is on the first slide. We are working with many colleagues based in Princeton, Columbia, of course Sciences Po, my own institution, and in India, Ashoka University, where the Trivedi Center for Political Data was part of this coalition. So we are working 60 people or so on many different facets of the Muslim conditions in India. And I'm not going to cover them all. I'm prepared to, of course, respond to questions regarding things I'm not going to cover, including violence, including ghettoization, including the women issue, including Kashmir. I'm going to focus only on 3 dimensions because they are already sufficiently demanding. One is, where do Muslims stand in the institutions? How are they represented in key institutions? Not them all, not all. I will not mention the judiciary, for instance, but it's a very important part of the story, and I can return to that if you want. Then, in socio-economic terms, where do Muslims stand? In terms of revenue, in terms of occupation, in terms of, standard of living. And then the education question, because this is a very important dimension. Where do Muslims stand so far as education is concerned? Well, the trend is almost the same everywhere, but if you look at institutions, you see a transformation so far as assemblies, elected institutions are concerned. In the past, we've done this work. We've seen an underrepresentation of Muslims among the IAS, Indian Administrative Service, upper echelons of the civil services. IAS officers have always been much less in terms of percentage than Muslims in the Indian society. 1951, the first census, Muslims are 10% of the Indian society. They've never been more than 7%, and that was very briefly a kind of spike in 1994. Today, they are 14.5% of the Indian society, if you go by the 2011 census, and they are roughly 4% of the IAS. It's not new, it's not improving. If you turn to the IPS officers, and here you have, by the way, the trend of the Muslim population. I repeat, from 10% to 14.5%, roughly. So you see every 10 years, it grows. What does not grow is this, the percentage of Muslims among police officers in India. Right from the 50s, this is 51, till 2016, has never been more than 4% roughly. And if you remove Kashmir, because of course Jammu and Kashmir has more Muslim policemen. So if you remove Kashmir, you are at something like 3%. Now this is very important. If you don't have Muslim policemen, you don't have anybody to speak to in the Thana, in the police station. And one of the things I'm not going to show you now, but that I'm prepared to also speak about, we have a special team looking at how Muslims relate to the police and the judiciary and vice versa. And one of the research they've done shows the overrepresentation of Muslims behind bars. We have roughly 1/4 of the inmates who are Muslim behind bars. You know, the kind of overrepresentation you find in many other places, but this is partly due to this sociology of the Indian police. Now, what has changed the most is this. If you want, the two previous slides showed a kind of flat line. This shows a decline. And the decline is particularly significant if you look at the number of Muslim members of parliament in the Lok Sabha in 1980. 1980, Indira Gandhi is back, and she shows her secularism briefly in the early 80s by nominating more Muslims as candidates to the assembly. So you have 9% of the members of parliament who are Muslims, when Muslims are 11% of society. It's almost proportionate. Now, and the trend is almost linear, you have less than 5% of members of parliament who are Muslim, Lok Sabha, lower house, directly elected by the people, when Muslims are 14.5%. So the gap is very significant. It's widening. There is one more graph that is showing this kind of thing, and I'm prepared to return to it in the discussion if you want. It is the percentage of people who know Urdu and the percentage of people who are Muslims. Today in Uttar Pradesh, only half of the Muslims know Urdu. And if they don't speak Urdu, it's because Urdu is not taught. Urdu has been recognized as an official language in Uttar Pradesh in 1989 only. And the Urdu press is printed in Hindi now, if you want. Well, in Devanagari, because people can't read. So this idea of divergence of lines, of trends, is very important. We are not looking at static figures. The percentage of Muslims is increasing, the percentage of Muslim MPs, the percentage of Muslim knowing Urdu is decreasing, and the gap, therefore, is widening. Okay? The percentage of Muslim candidates is also declining, and that's very important. When you do not get tickets for a winnable constituency, why should you try to contest? So you have fewer and fewer Muslim candidates at the time of elections. I will not impose on you this, but I will show you that in most of the states, we see a decline of the percentage of Muslims among the members of assemblies. As I said, it's a federation, India, where states matter a lot. Political life is at the state level. Well, Gujarat, 10% of the population is Muslim. It has peaked in the mid-70s, 6%. Now you have 1.5% of the MLAs who are Muslim, couple of Muslims. Gujarat has excluded Muslims from the public life. Ahmedabad has one MLA, Godhra sometimes, Baroda sometimes, that's it. It's true, Uttar Pradesh it's very dramatic. Uttar Pradesh had 17% of its MLAs being Muslim under Samajwadi Party under Akhilesh Yadav. 2017, Yogi Adityanath takes over. Look at this drop from 17 to 4%. There are something like 20% of Muslims in Uttar Pradesh. So the gap between the 20% they are and the 4% they have to represent them is really dramatic. And the last elections have shown the same result. Rajasthan, it depends who wins. When Congress wins, Muslim percentage grows. When BJP wins, it declines. And we'll see what happens next month. We'll see. But it's an amazing kind of alternation in power. Maharashtra, it has never been very big. Maharashtra, it's an amazing place. Bombay, 20% Muslims. Bombay Muslims have such a strong presence. No political representative. Zero Muslim in the Lok Sabha in Maharashtra. And in the assembly, 3%, 4%, never more than that. They're not represented. Karnataka, it depends again. When Congress is back, the graph grows again, but underrepresented still. West Bengal is an interesting case. West Bengal is the only state in India where the percentage of Muslims increases in the assembly because of TMC, because of Mamata Banerjee. 35% of Muslims in West Bengal is a huge percentage. They are not 35%, but they are 20%. And that's because Mamata has invested in the Muslim minority. So you see, the variations, the states are not so easy to compare. Madhya Pradesh, of course, almost zero because, well, there are so few. There are 5%. Now, let's shift to another entry point, socioeconomic condition. Here you have different sources. By the way, we are struggling with statistical sources in India. It's more and more difficult. The 2021 census has not taken place. For the first time since 1881, between 1881 and 2011, every 10 years, there was a census. And not I would say, amateurish kind of census. It was a very professional census. And they knocked at each and every door. You had 2.5 million people knocking at the door of 1.4 billion people. 2021, no census. It will take place after the elections. Data is something very difficult to get these days. National Sample Survey does not measure poverty anymore. We don't know, we can't say what is the percentage of people living below poverty line in India today. The 2017-18 survey of NSS has been considered as unreliable because the figures were very bad. For the first time since the 70s, the percentage of people living below the poverty line has increased, according to this data. So we are struggling, but still, we have a very good source, that is the Indian Human Development Survey, AHDS, the India Debt and Investment Survey, and the periodic labor force surveys, which are also very, very rich. What do they say? They show that Muslims are lagging behind Hindus, and the gap is widening. between 2002 and 2019, the gap has been multiplied by 3, roughly, in terms of per capita wealth. That's something you can partly explain by this figure. In terms of occupation, Muslims are underrepresented in the public sector, which is so important in India. What do you want to do? Government job. Government job is what everybody wants. That's where you have social security, that's where you have pensions, that's where you have, safety. And they are very badly underrepresented there. They are not in the private sector. It's very interesting. We speak about the formal sector, the salariat, the regular economy. That's really bad, and it explains why when you are Muslims, usually you are your own. Well, you're on your own. You are your own account worker is nothing but, the mechanics on the side of the road. This is something you see here again. Self-employed, 42%, which is really a lot compared to the Hindus, and interestingly, caste does not make any difference. This is a very important point. I'll return to that one. You have, of course, caste within Muslims, and you have mostly this difference between Muslim OBCs, we call them pasmandas, mostly, and they're ajlafs. And others are not recognized as a category. So officially, you don't have Dalit Muslims. Of course, in practice, you have Dalit Muslims, but officially, they are not recognized. So in the statistic, you have only Muslim OBCs, pasmandas, low caste Muslims, and ashrafs. Ashrafs are upper caste Muslims. And we assume that they are almost 50-50. It makes no difference compared to the Hindus in terms of occupation, in terms of wealth, which is an interesting and counterintuitive thing. That's a bit complicated, but let me give you some examples of what I want to show here. What we can do, because of the Indian Human Development Survey, is to compare the access to the salariat, the jobs, of Dalits, Hindu Dalits, and Muslims. And what we could see here is that the percentage of Dalits, having a job in the salariat is larger than the percentage of Muslims having a job. For the first time in the 21st century, the new Dalits are the Muslims, because Dalits have prevailed in many states, all the states in blue, largely because of positive discrimination. You have this fabulous, I would say, innovation that Dr. Ambedkar introduced in the Indian Constitution, giving a quota of 15% to Dalits in education, public sector activities, and elected assemblies. So you have 15% of the jobs in the public sector which go to Dalits, and they have gradually occupied important positions. You have now a Dalit bourgeoisie. You have a Dalit middle class. When on the contrary, Muslims for whom there is no positive discrimination except in the south and only in few states with small percentages, they have followed the other trajectory. So you've had this historic transformation of Dalits prevailing over Muslims in socioeconomic terms. It's also true in terms of revenue. The income gap between Muslims and Dalits has made very significant transformation. So you see that everywhere where you have something in red, you have Dalits earning more than Muslims. And there is a change, there is a significant change between, that's why we need to update this data. In all the states in blue, Dalits are earning more than Muslims. In the north, in the west, in the east, and the south. So in 10 years, the transformation has been absolutely significant. So if you look for, that's the last slide on this, a kind of summary of the point. You see the per capita wealth. You see how clearly caste makes a difference on the Hindu side. Hindu upper caste earn twice what the Hindu average earned, and probably 3 times what Dalits earn. Now, you look at Muslims. All Muslims earn something like 1/3 of upper caste Hindus. And you see no difference almost between upper caste Muslims and lower caste Muslims, which is really very significant. Last, education. That's very important also. Where do Muslims stand in education? Same sources and similar results. Again, the gap is widening. You look at the percentage of graduates. You have 1.2% of Muslims who graduated in 92, 93, 94. Less than half of the percentage of Hindus. But in the case of Hindus, we've reached this kind of almost double-digit figure. When in the case of Muslims, we are still below 5%, which is very little. Well, it's very little in general, but the gap is widening. So the percentage of youth attending higher education, we have almost 34% for the Hindus, and the gap remains, increases with less than 20% on the Muslim side. What we see when we disaggregate that in geographical terms is very interesting. We see that this is not Kerala, sorry, this is Uttar Pradesh. This is Kerala, this is Uttar Pradesh. Kerala, there is always an increase. Muslim upper caste have increased from 2.8 to 3.7 to 4.2. This is terrifying. Uttar Pradesh upper caste, for the first time in the history of India, you see the percentage of youth attending higher education institutions declining. The percentage of upper caste Muslims are less numerous. Sorry, the number of upper caste Muslims is less numerous now in Uttar Pradesh than it used to be 10 years before. From 14.1% to 12%. And this is what we need to explain. Why don't young Muslims go to school? Why are they dropping out? And that's not something that statistics can tell you. Statistics give you the larger picture. And then you have to go and do fieldwork. So we have teams of people doing fieldwork, and what you see, there are 2 or 3 things. One, to be a Muslim in the classroom is not so easy. Your classmates, your teacher, your textbooks are giving an image of the Muslims which make you uncomfortable. Then you have another problem, that is mobility. How far can you travel safely? So many instances of assault, intimidation, so many stories. People don't dare to read or do books in the metro don't dare to say salam alaikum on the phone when they are called. Mobility, how far do you travel, which is a reflection of ghettoization. You withdraw in your shell because you take a risk when you go out. And then, more importantly, why do you study for? What's the point? If at the end, remember, in terms of occupation, you can't get anything but an informal kind of work. So this is new. This is completely new. Not to go for education is completely new. Everybody wants to go and get a good education. This is the key. It used to be the necessary step for social mobility. If we see this trend confirmed in the coming years, we'll have a completely new transformation of the mind, of the scene, really. Maybe private education will take over, but for private education, this is, by the way, one more reason. Education is more and more expensive because it's private. You can't get any good education in the public anyway. So that's for education, and sorry, I'm going in the wrong direction. And this is, the last slide is this one. The last slide shows that, again, in terms of education, caste makes no difference, which is very counterintuitive. Upper caste Muslims and lower caste Muslims are exactly in the same situation. Exactly in the same situation. It makes no difference. Well, what makes a difference is the decline of scholarships. There was a Maulana Azad scholarship that has been stopped. There were so many scholarships that had been introduced by the Manmohan Singh government at the Sachar Committee report. Sachar Committee report in 2005 said Muslims are lagging behind, we need to do something. And they introduced some measures, including scholarships. These ones have been discontinued. And we see the results. Muslims get hardly any support, any scholarship. When you see Dalits and Adivasis getting support because it is positive discrimination. So I will stop here, but I'm prepared to engage with other issues. I've mentioned violence. We can certainly return to the question of riots. I've mentioned Urdu. We can also return to this question if you want. I gave you this figure. Only 8% of Urdu speakers in Uttar Pradesh when there are 18% of Muslims. The gap is 10 percentage points. And we can also talk about the processes of ghettoization and others. I just close with what remedies. We are not supposed only to look at a bad situation. We are also supposed to suggest solutions. And the solutions that, of course, comes to mind for this socio-economic dimension, only for this, is positive discrimination. There is no alternative at that point, at that level. When you have reached that level, when you are so low, you need to be helped as a group, as Muslim. Forget about caste, about class. Discrimination is affecting Muslims as a whole. And when you look at the south, Karnataka, Kerala, Telangana, there are reservations, small percentages, 4%, 5%, but still, it helps a lot. So, in a non-Hindu Rashtra, we would certainly contemplate reservations as the solution, but we'll have to see whether this is feasible or not. And I stop here.
Christophe, what you've told us is very distressing indeed. We see discrimination having negative effects upon the Muslim community in India across the board. What I find most distressing is actually what you said about the police, that there is increasingly less representation of Muslims, so that you cannot go to the Thana and feel safe. Of course, this discrimination works in very different ways. Sometimes it is subtle, sometimes it is very overt, like Shabana Azmi and her husband couldn't find a place in Delhi. Delhi is one of the most enlightened places in India. It's so utterly cosmopolitan, but living in a Muslim neighborhood is so difficult for somebody like her even. There's so much that's heartrending in what you've told us. And yet, there's much, much more that can be said. The name of Aligarh Muslim University was going to be changed. The Muslim was going to be struck out. When somebody said, hey, what about Hindu Banaras University? Strike the Hindu out of that. That would be wrong. The newspaper, the Hindu, then just the would be left, etc. So it's, it doesn't make sense really to have a modern state run on such narrow parochial grounds. But now I'm going to take some issue with you.
Mm-hmm.
All right? It's okay? Let's compare immigrants from Pakistan and Bangladesh in the UK. Those who have made mini Pakistans for themselves in Birmingham, in Bradford, in East London. And let's see how they compare in terms of education with Hindu immigrants, and perhaps compare how over time that difference has also widened. And this being in a place where you can't really seriously talk about discrimination against Muslims there. Because what Muslim parents choose for their children is quite different from what Hindu parents choose for their children. Mm. There is a lot of homeschooling. There's a lot of emphasis upon rote learning, much as what we have in Pakistan. And let me talk of a personal experience with you. I went to Maulana Azad Urdu University, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad Urdu University in Hyderabad. I gave a lecture over there. First it was to be on special relativity in Urdu. I said fine. But then they changed the topic and said, why is education necessary for Muslims? Now, why do you even need to talk about why education is necessary for Muslims? It's a given. And the quality of that university, and I compared it with the next university that I went to give a lecture, and that was a triple IT, Indian Institute of Information Technology, and the difference was that of Zameen or Asman, heaven and earth. So it's not just discrimination. It's cultural attitudes too. So one must disaggregate that in a very complex situation. I feel a lot of pain seeing the statistics, but I'm not willing to put all the blame onto the Modi government in this case.
Well, first of all, it was there before, so it's not so new. It's exaggerating, it's more and more visible, but it was there before, for sure. Secondly, yes, we have in our team a special group on social reform to find out what is the community's attitude vis-à-vis modernity. It's mostly about the gender issue, but it's also about education and so on. It's very difficult to say that it's the attitude of the community that is at stake, but there is clearly a leadership problem. There is clearly a conservative leadership for the community that is a hindrance. The clerics do not help, for instance. The Dini Madaris in some parts of North India are very counterproductive. And this is why I mention affirmative action so repeatedly, because you need leaders, you need role models, you need modern role models who can reform the community from inside. And it's exactly what positive discrimination is about. Positive discrimination is not a mass program. You create an elite. And what is missing for the Indian Muslims today is an elite. There is no leader. There is no leader left. I mean, there is no enlightened leader. Where are they, you see? So, I agree, there is this problem. I really attribute it to a leadership problem, to an elite kind of problem, not necessarily the culture. You know, the culture is malleable. The culture is, at least you can influence the cultural attitudes if you have someone who can guide you somewhere. And this is what is missing, badly missing.
So, would you then subscribe to the notion that is the genesis of Pakistan? The fact that the best of Muslims, the most educated ones, came here and left the Indians over there leaderless.
It did not help at all, for sure. When you look at who left and who stayed behind, you know, this community was decapitated, literally. You look at the ICS officers, they all left to Pakistan. The Muhajirs, they made the Pakistani state in the beginning. Same with, of course, officers, army men, intellectuals, journalists. So those who stayed behind were mostly artisans, tillers of the land, because you can't leave your land if you live on land. Some landowners could live. Liaquat Ali Khan could live, and he left Muzaffarnagar behind. But those who were tilling the land for him had to stay behind, and they had a new master who was of a different kind. So yes, there was this complete transformation of the community, and it took a long time for the artisans to become industrialists, and there is only a minuscule Muslim business community in India. Well, so many of the Bohras and Kodjas came here also from Gujarat. So really this is the handicap they had to, of course, recover from, and they have not fully recovered from it. Yeah.
Sad truth. Now, I think the time is come for taking questions from the audience. So we will start from over there.
इसमें यूँ अच्छा थैंक यू प्रोफेसर हुडबॉय फॉर द इनविटेशन. आपकी इजाज़त से मैं इन साहिब से फ्रांसीसी में सवाल पूछना चाहूँगा. उसके मानी ये आखिज़ हो जाएंगे इनके जवाब से.
तर्जुमा कीजिएगा उसके बाद.
मैं मुआजना करना चाहता हूँ भारत में मुसलमान के, अमेरिका में कालों के और इसराइल में अरबी रिहायशों के. Donc merci beaucoup pour votre...
So I will translate, that's it?
J'ai déjà
okay.
traduit pour eux. Donc la situation des musulmans en Inde est beaucoup pire que je ne l'imaginais, grâce à vos statistiques. Alors, j'aimerais faire une comparaison, d'après vos études, entre les Afro-Américains aux États-Unis, les musulmans en Inde et les citoyens arabes d'Israël en Israël. Est-ce que c'est vraiment la même chose ou est-ce que c'est encore pire, d'après vos données? Merci beaucoup.
I think there are many similarities, and it's a very good point, because, you know... Yeah, he wants me to compare the situation of the Muslims in India with those who are in Israel and the black Americans in the US. And it's a very good point, because this is where you need to qualify what is a democracy. And the subtitle of my book is called Modi's India, Hindu Nationalism and the Rise of Ethnic Democracy. What is an ethnic democracy? A democracy like Israel is de jure an ethnic democracy, because it's a Jewish state. It is there, you know, it is on the flag, but it's a democracy. because you have elections, you have some independent judiciary, and you have some free press. Well, these are three pillars of what we call democracy. But in this democracy, some citizens are more equal than others, to paraphrase Orwell, because the Jews have more rights. In the US and in India, it's a de facto ethnic democracy rather than a de jure ethnic democracy, but the result is very similar. The percentage of Muslims behind the bars in India is very similar to the percentage of the blacks behind the bars in the US. The same kind of overrepresentation. And in terms of presence in the public sphere, you have also this kind of discrimination. Discrimination or self-discrimination, this is always very tricky. At one point, do you stop to try? When is self-censorship reflecting a kind of internalization of, well, there is no need for me to try because I will not get what I deserve. No? But the result is the same. So I think we have entered a new era where this is becoming more or less the rule. Ethnic democracy has become the standard because of national populism. How do you win an election today? When you're Orban, when you're Bolsonaro, when you're Trump, when you're Erdogan, you attack your minorities in the name of nationalism. And the nationalism the nation you defend is the nation of the sons of the soil, the majoritarian nation, at the expense of the minorities, migrants or minorities of some other community. There are elections, but there is no equality.
Hello, sir. As you discussed that in the areas where Congress wins, the number of Muslim representation increases, and in the areas where BJP wins, the number of Muslim representation decreases. So what is the reason behind that? I mean, Modi wasn't like other politicians graduated from Lincoln's Inn, graduated from University of London. How did he come to change the course of Indian polity? Like Congress was the founding party of modern day India, but it changed. Less than a decade, Modi changed the course of Indian polity. How did it happen drastically? How can such a change happen? Despite you were a tea seller, how does it happen? Does it happen? Is it possible?
Well, it is possible. No, this is vote bank politics. If you want to consolidate the Hindu majority at the time of election, you do it by targeting the other. By the way, this is what he had started to do in Gujarat. It's not 2014 the starting point. It's 2002. The model crystallized in 2002 and was repeated. He won in 2007, he won in 2012, he won in 2014, he won in 2019, always following the same modus operandi. You have a huge Hindu majority that you can transform into a political majority by targeting the other. And by saying, by the way, these are fifth columnists supported by the neighboring country. This is what he said in 2002 for the first time. Of course it works. And again, it works elsewhere too. This is not, how did Netanyahu win? Yeah. By having a very similar attitude, security-oriented, against the fifth columnist, against the terrorist in our midst. This rhetoric is very well oiled. By the way, there are companies who are selling this marketing, political marketing. It's not as if, and they invest billions in this. An election campaign in India is as expensive as in the US. BJP spent $3.9 billion. Yeah. So it's easy after that to sell your lie.
Did you notice, sir, our textbooks are still full of hate against the Congress and Gandhi and Nehru. So surprisingly now, there are many Pakistanis who would privately tell you that Congress was not such a bad party. So, but our textbooks don't have any hate against the BJP. And has any study been done how the Pakistani Muslims and Pakistani Hindus or Bangladeshi Hindus have done compared to Hindus, compared to Muslims in India? For example, I read that even in this situation, the literacy rate in Indian Muslims is higher than Pakistani Muslims. There it is probably 65%, and here we have 62%.
Yeah, well, that's quite possible. You know, the fact that it's interesting, the point you made. I would not be surprised if your extremist would be more than happy to have extremists on the other side too. First, it's a reconfirmation that partition was needed. Two, there is no way we can reconcile. And each of us will be having our own majoritarian agenda, suppressing the minorities. They do it, we do it. This is the problem. Because, and it's not only in these two countries, it's all over the world. Now, when will you be able to migrate in a place, well, in the future, when each government will be majoritarian to such an extent that you want pure politics and a pure society and a pure race?
Hello, sir. I wanted to ask, how did Britain, after the incident of 9/11, somehow I was able to have a Pakistani prime minister, a Muslim prime minister? There was a huge discrimination against Muslims after 9/11. So how was it that British changed their political scheme in order to allow more Muslim integration? In fact, most European countries have a lot of integration with immigrants. So how did they do it? And how can we implement that in India?
Well, Britain is an interesting case indeed because they have gone further than any other European country, really. Multiculturalism worked there, but you can say that it peaked with Brexit, or almost. And now there is an anti-immigrant attitude. You know, they are, it's very interesting. The South Asians have closed the door behind them, and they are now in a position to tell Afghans and other, you'll go to Rwanda, you know? This is so typical of, don't do to myself what I do to others. But you're right, this is, in a way, a measure of the multicultural society that Britain has become. How far is this sustainable? How far can it go is precisely the question. And the Leicester riots between Hindus and Muslims last year were an eye-opening to many people. Oh, they have imported their own conflict in our society, and now we have to deal with it. So this is possibly one of the next steps that we will see. Yeah.
Okay, sir. There's one thing. You talked about the Indian Muslims and the statics and all that. I will say that in international world, there are many examples we have that Muslims are being suppressed and being misused. When we see that there are terrorist organizations, majority of the terrorist organizations, when they hire for their incentive, majority go to this community. So if I say that there is something wrong presented by the scholars of this religion, that they are not presenting the real religion or the real practicing the real thing. So this is the problem in the whole world. This is not the
No, Islamophobia is everywhere, and in fact it is fueled by Islamism. And this kind of amalgam between Islamism and Islam is the big problem we are facing all the time. How do you make sure that people understand that these are really very different entities? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a wonderful lecture. Sir, you talked about ghettoization of Muslims and the unholy marriage of Hinduism and nationalism in India. But what are the economic implications of the changed policy? I mean, India is dreaming to be the world's superpower, economic power. Will this policy hamper this dream? Thank you.
Yeah, that's something I keep repeating. If you want to grow, you can't let 1/5 of your society underdeveloped, undereducated. There is a contradiction between this objective and the fact that you have this huge burden that will remain behind you and will drag you constantly. So this is where ideology prevails over rationality. You know, Atif yesterday repeated ad nauseum, you have to be scientific, you have to be rational. Well, ideologues all over the world are not. Ghettoization is a very important point. And a ghetto is not a slum. A ghetto is the place where the rich and the poor go together for safety. And it has a lot of implications. Sometimes it helps because the rich comes to a place where there is so little development that they can help, but up to a point. In fact, you lose the rich capacity that was in the midst of society and helping society to modernize, and it's really completely counterproductive. So ghettoization is also pushing the economy in the wrong direction. By the way, I'm not so sure India is bound to be this superpower economically that they claim to be. And one of the reasons is that one. Too many people are below poverty line and not helped sufficiently.
Dr. Hoodbhoy, for your wonderful moderation and your line of questioning, very stimulating. Dr. Jaffrelot, given your grip and command on the history of Pakistan as well, I'm really tempted to bring you a little on our side of the border. My question, the kind of political consistency that has let a party continue 3 terms on that side of the border, can we aspire to that kind of a consistency here? Should we aspire to that kind of a consistency? I mean, zooming out, do you have a broader message for us, the youth, as a strategy of surviving in this society, as a message of hope? That's my question, basically.
Yeah, you know, the problem here is similar and different at the same time. There is certainly this huge issue of, in post-Zia Pakistan, the modern views, the modern ideas have been on the back burner, number one. 2, you have this other big challenge, how do you emancipate a society from an army that is in control of the economy in the first place, and of many other things also. That's a big challenge also. And 3rd, you have, and this is, as we said, in the DNA of Pakistan right from day one, an elitist polity. That is the recipe for conservatism. When the elite can remain so well entrenched in the economy, in the bureaucracy, everywhere, at the expense of development, you're stuck. And you may change the party, and you do change the party, but they are not in the driver's seat, number 1. And they are representing the same interest, number 2. How can you change? And I'm sorry, it's not very optimistic, but you see how the challenges are, in that sense, of a different kind, partly because the civil society on that side could not emancipate itself so much from the establishment. Let's use this key word. Now, on the Indian side, we may certainly see a similar kind of establishment taking shape. And it's a laboratory. It's so fascinating to see how in 10 years, infiltration of each and every institution is taking place. Education is transformed. 10 years. You can't recognize the universities which were there before. GNU. You can't recognize GNU. So there is a convergence, which is certainly very disturbing, but helps us to understand how it happens. Well, it can happen very quickly. Well, Zia was there for 11 years.
Thank you, Christophe. You defined the Hindu race as, well, not you, Savarkar did that,
Yes.
but And you said that this whole idea is again gaining a lot of traction in India. So racism is just, a step on the ladder to fascism. How do you see this in the broader regional context? And a fascist state then also becomes an expansionist state. So how do you see that in the context of, conflicts that are already there in the subcontinent? How does that pan out?
There are two questions in one, and I like to do justice to both, because to use the term fascism in the case of Hindu nationalism is sometimes problematic, and for two reasons. One, in fascism you have the cult of the leader, and certainly today you have the cult of Modi. But Modi, in that sense, is not typical of the RSS culture. RSS is not driven by a leader, precisely because it's a very old organization and it's supposed to be there forever. When you have one leader, when you live on one leader, when you rely on one leader, you know he will die one day and you will be stuck. RSS has had 9 leaders. We don't even remember their names. So the organization is not as many fascist, most of the fascist parties, based on this principle of the leader, which is a big difference. The other big difference is they are not so much obsessed by the state. They want to convert society. They are a network-based organization. So you have this amazing network of the shakas, the branches, probably 60,000 branches today, probably 3.5 million of members at the social level. This is also why they are invested in trade union, student union, peasant union, society, civil society, plus vigilante groups, making cultural policing. For fascists, to conquer the state is the priority, and then you impose your authority on society. For them, to gain society to their cause, to gain them over, and to see the state coming as a ripe fruit. It's a long-term perspective. And your second question, I'm sorry, what was the end?
It was about the expansion.
Yes, very important point. You have indeed this ideology of Akhand Bharat that is very much there right from the beginning, right from partition. Because this Punya Bhumi, when you look at their map, and they have always this map of the region, it covers everything between, as Savarkar said, Sindhu and Sindhu, from the Indus till the sea, below the Himalayan arc. This is Punya Bhumi. This is the land. This is Akhand Bharat. How far can this result in expansionism? How far can this result in some adventurous military operation? Very difficult to say. Some people interpret the fact that Jammu and Kashmir has been downgraded to a union territory status, to the fact that they wanted to somewhat regain on even accession. In fact, the Chinese have reacted to one of the speeches of BJP leaders, Amit Shah, as a revisionist attitude. So far, we don't have any sign of a military expansion, and the resources are not very much there either. But it's a very good point.
Hi there. Thanks a lot.
But just one minute before that. I think there's a bit more to her question.
Mm-hmm.
India did make the atom bomb. India then went into sophisticated delivery systems. And then India now has a blue water navy. So that's more than is required to defend its coast, which suggests that now that it has new economic power, that it is not simply satisfied with mere defense. Akhand Bharat, maybe some RSS ideologues would dream of that. The majority of of Indians have given up on Pakistan. They wouldn't want to take it over, I think. But they would like to defeat Pakistan militarily. So that could be a partial justification for Indian military strength, the renewal, revival, expansion of that. But what about this blue water navy? That's very worrisome, isn't it?
Well, it's part of what we call the Indo-Pacific strategy. You know, Indo-Pacific is now the key word for most of the strategists. India is part of Quad with the US, Japan, Australia. It's very close to countries like France with a lot of interest in the Indo-Pacific, in the Indian Ocean in the first place. But in that part of the globe, it's more vis-a-vis China than vis-a-vis anybody else that India is turning its guns. To resist China's expansionism, you know, the fact that China is so strongly entrenched in Sri Lanka today, Umbantota being a kind of Chinese deep sea port, the Maldives, of course Gwadar, India feels encircled by China. So this is primarily a defensive kind of attitude. Now, you can convert a defensive attitude into a more offensive one. That's for sure, if you have the resources. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for your talk, Doctor. I was curious if you have any optimism at all, if India could ever go back to, let's say, Nehru's India. Because in my simple mind, I could say, okay, when BJP loses power, then things will go back to normal. But surely it's not that easy. You can draw a parallel to Pakistan, how we have treated our non-Muslims. So taking BJP out of power perhaps won't be enough. And perhaps if there's a path to recovery, what do you think that is?
Yeah, this is a very good question because elections sometimes makes no difference or hardly any difference. And if Congress comes back in May, June, with a coalition, of course, not on their own, they are very much aware of that. It means that the state bureaucracy, the economy, because, you know, there is one dimension we've not mentioned so far, but there is the political economy behind this kind of national populist regimes. You have oligarchs. You rely on big industrialists always. How do you bring them over? You know, how do you get? So the challenges will be many, and at the top of it, they'll be in the street because that's where they are the most effective ones. So yes, you can be optimistic in the sense that the point of no return is not reached, and you can certainly return to what India was to some extent, but if you take care of all these non-electoral related, not non-election related implications, which means a serious, determined work that will be very difficult.
Hi. Thank you so much. It was great. My name is Abdullah Spandiar. I'm a law student. I would ask my question in Urdu because my English is too broken. So I'm a little nervous in front of Sir Mighty. सर मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि बंटवारे से पहले ये जो सारे फिगर थे जिस तरह हमने देखा कि क्या ये फिगर भी इसी तरह ही थे, हिंदू इस तरह ही ज़्यादा अपर हैंड था उनका और मुसलमान जो थे वो कम थे, और क्या दूसरी चीज़ ये है कि सर अगर बंटवारा ना होता, जिस तरह हमारे बहुत से पाकिस्तान में पॉलिटिकल फिलोसफर का और उनका बिलीव ये है कि बंटवारा नहीं होना चाहिए था, तो क्या अगर बंटवारा नहीं होता तो क्या ये हिंदू नेशनलिस्ट ये नेशनलिज्म छोड़ देते और हमारा ये फिगर जो हर एस्पेक्ट में जिस तरह सर ने दिखाया हमें कि 4% है 5% है, क्या ये ज़्यादा हो जाता, 20 हो जाता, 25 हो जाता, या हम हिंदुओं के बराबर आ जाते, या कम से कम उनसे उनके पीछे ही चलते होते, क्या ऐसा होता सर? थैंक यू.
If partition hadn't happened, would Muslims have been in this terrible state? Now they have been split into 3 different parts of South Asia. And after all, the difference between Hindus and Muslims was there 100 years ago as well. So how much worse is it compared to that?
Yeah, well, certainly Muslims were on the decline before partition. There is no doubt that post 1857 mutiny, you saw a decline because of education, because of trade, because of the modern economy, in which they were not so interested as Hindus and others. But partition precipitated, amplified considerably this trend. And yes, my hunch is that this trend will be completely different if the Indian Muslims had retained the elite Muslims who left in 47. Definitely.
So my question to you is that actually I have a concern that you talked about positive discrimination towards for Muslims, and you talked about the Muslim leadership should come up. But I have concern that what do you have to say on a common Hindu mindset about a common Muslim in India? For example, Bollywood, if anyone Bollywood fan is here, I apologies in advance. Bollywood and digital media and social media did far worse in spreading Islamophobia, that a common Hindu mindset is so manipulated that it is very difficult for Muslim to sustain in that society. So I think that positive discrimination and other things, they are not gonna do better if a mindset of Hindu gets not flexible for Muslim. Please comment on this. Thank you.
Yeah, but this is where policies have to be decided for changing the mindset of the people. Because if you introduce quotas, you force majoritarian people to meet minority people and to realize that they are not what they thought they were. Because now we have this problem. Islamophobia is nurtured by ignorance of who is the other, because you do not encounter the other anymore. So this is a very, I would say, voluntaristic policy. Positive discrimination makes sure that you mix in the bureaucracy, in the assembly, in the school. Because if you wait for the mindset of the people to change, you may wait forever. And certainly social media is something manipulated by, you have an army of trolls, paid trolls, who are constantly bombarding you with this image of the other. So that needs to be regulated. But you can't change that so easily. You can introduce positive discrimination more easily, I think. And that will probably have similar effects, hopefully.
As Professor Hoodbhoy said, that it is pitiful for a secular and diverse state like India to be work on the nationalism ideologies. So if somehow that India succeeded by suppressing the Muslims, what would be the behavior of the other Muslim states towards India? As we can say that the Middle East is putting hefty amount of investments in India. So do you think it would change their behavior towards India?
It's very interesting. This is a very good question. We have a team following what are the reactions in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Turkey, Egypt, to what happens to the Indian Muslims. The same way these countries are largely indifferent to the fate of Uyghurs in China, they are largely indifferent to the fate of Muslims in India. Except one Prophet Muhammad is attacked. Then they react. It's a very interesting disconnect between what you call solidarity, the Muslim street, my food. There is no solidarity, no sense of being part of a ummah of any kind. So, states, we are back to the elite question, State elites, governing rulers, have their own interest at the expense of the larger agenda they claim to defend. This is realpolitik.
We're going to have two last questions after this.
You very briefly already mentioned, JNU is not anymore what it used to be, right? I was wondering if you can comment on the marginalization a bit in the academic sector and the higher education. I am an academic from the natural sciences. I work in water resources. I work with people at JNU, but also at IIT. And I even see it with colleagues at IIT that it's getting much, much harder for them. For example, in glaciology, where I work in, which should be very secular, glaciers really don't care. The most lauded glaciologist in India is Muslim, and he's having a very hard time. And he's at IIT, which is a bit more, I would have expected, outside of the influence of this of BJP, but I see that JNU as well. And I was wondering, thinking what Atif Mian yesterday said for Pakistan, it would be so crucial for Pakistan kind of to look out to the best Pakistani scientists abroad on certain topics and ask them, what is that going to do to India if the higher education is so undermined by this the anti-secularization for their future prospect and being able to cope with challenges in future, if that capacity may not be there anymore because it's so much pushed by BJP or the Hindu ideology.
Yeah, no, the consequences will be huge indeed. And you mentioned IITs, but last week IIMs have been transferred to the government. IIMs have lost their autonomy. Yeah, so it's true of the public universities for sure. Now it's true for these elite organizations. What is also clear is that private universities have not resisted this trend. And you can understand why. Owners need clearances from the government for their own business. They are all businessmen. So there is hardly any place really that is safe or saved or spared. Of course, again, in the south, it's much easier. But it's not so surprising. When you look at the agenda of Hindu nationalism, it is to reshape the psyche of the people. Well, education is number one. By the way, it was true of Jamaat Islami when Zia was there. Jamaat Islami was asked to write the syllabus with the support of the Saudis. These organizations, they want to change the mind of the people. Education is one of the resources they use at the expense of rationalism and development, of course.
But if I might add something to this, it's not the Muslim question which is important as far as higher education goes. The restrictions that are being put in Indian universities are not on Muslims, they are on the left over there.
Yeah, liberal,
the left is seen as far more dangerous than Muslims, and every effort is being made to quell them. So you see, this is what accounts for JNU being a totally different university from what it used to be earlier. And Ashoka University that is one of the most liberal ones over there, and clamped down. That's because it's seen as dangerous to the Hindutva ideology.
Yeah, NGOs have a tough time as well.
Thank you, Dr. Christophe. Great talk. So the diaspora, Indian diaspora, they are, outside, they're away from the lands, whatever's happening, all of the dynamics taking place in India, let's say in the US, wherever they may be. Why is it that they seem to be a part of this whole transformation rather than pushing back against it? And is there any hope that some support could somehow be obtained from them to push back and to, reverse things?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
If I can just add on to this, it's exactly the same thing with the Pakistani diaspora. It tends to be very conservative. So does the Hindu diaspora.
Yeah.
But you're
This is a case of long distance nationalism. This is a very interesting phrase, and usually you are more radical when you are away. First of all, you face no consequence, and secondly, you live in a kind of fantasy. That's why it works for the Sikh, it works for the Tamils, it works for everybody. Now, what is interesting is indeed to explain, to understand this militancy. First, RSS has targeted the Hindu diaspora from day one. Now, it has a different name in UK, in the US. It is the Hindu Sevak Sangh, but because it cannot be Rashtriya, it is in UK or in the US, but it is active over there. And they have their own student union, they have their own activities. Vishwa Hindu Parishad America, active for decades. So that's one very important dimension. You re-Hinduize the second generation boys and girls because the parents want them to learn what is their culture, what are their roots, and they are more than happy to help. Then you have the temples, the network of temples. You go to New Jersey, you go to London, you have these Swaminarayan temples, huge temples, which are also part of this network. And then, and last but not the least, resources for influencing the governments of the countries of the host society. Now, Indians in the US are the model minority, richest than anybody except the Jews, more educated than anybody. So they have people in very important positions in the business world, in the professions, and they can give money to candidates. You know, there is a caucus. Again, New Jersey, Chicago, the Bay Area, IT engineers. So they may be a minority, but they've been infiltrated, quote unquote, and they have resources. So their influence is certainly disproportionate to their number, but it makes some difference. And it's true in UK as well, where we've seen the Tory party bringing in its midst second or third generation, quasi-Hindu nationalist. It's a very interesting topic because it helps to understand why the West is also so silent on what's going on in India. Of course, the West is silent because of China. You need a country to balance China, number one. But number two, you have this strong lobbying. You can speak about an ethnic lobby. The same way you have a Jewish ethnic lobby. You have an Hindu lobby in the making, influencing foreign policies from the inside. It's fascinating because, again, it's a laboratory. We see it happening under our eyes. And very quickly, because the fear of China is very big. So they play on that.
So we've run out of questions, but I have one last. In an intensely secular country like France, your country, what form does Hindu nationalism take over there in its diaspora? Do they also build temples there like they build in the UK or America?
No, France is more than secular. It is laïc. No, there is a real difference. Secularism means you're prepared to recognize religions on a par. You are multicultural. Laïcité means what it meant for Atatürk. We don't want religion at all in the public sphere. So you can't wear anything that is reflecting some religion, some religious affiliation in the classroom, in the public sphere. And to build shrines of any kind is also very difficult. It's a problem. It's a problem because where can Muslims pray? So it's true for the Hindu temples as well. It's not easy for them. There is one Gurudwara. There are few temples, some mosques. But yes, laïcité means we don't want religion in the public sphere. So it's completely different from Britain.
I understand. And so you cannot even have idols in display in a public place. Yeah? Okay, good. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Christophe. It was wonderful. It was truly enlightening. Thank you.